Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we're back in the shop today, and today we'll be working on the truck. If you could kind of see behind me and below me, you'll see that there's something there that probably should be on the truck, but you guys know what we've been working on. And this is the OEM factory hood that came off of the Sierra. And as you guys can see, the clear coat on this thing is totally trashed. It's basically doing what the roof did. You know, the clear coat kind of delaminated, and then the base coat starts failing underneath it. You can make it wet, but it still doesn't have a clear shine. So there's no way to save this paint job. And as you guys already know, we picked up that 2500 HD hood a while back. If you guys look over here, you'll see that we have the hood actually installed on the truck. What we'll be doing today is taking the hood and cutting it and modifying a bit so that we can get the headlights to fit. So here's the passenger side. You can see we've already notched it, made it and smoothed it out this way that there's a consistent, probably like an 1/8 inch gap all the way around the headlight. And so you kind of got our bright white hood with some primer on it, and we've got to cut this bottom corner off. And we'll show you how to do that. Now, to give you a little bit more background on this project, I actually installed the hood yesterday, but I've probably spent 2 or 3 hours just fine-tuning it. And then on top of that, I actually had to go in and adjust the hood latch and move it down, simply because the whole front end of the hood was pushed up, and just moving it down like a 1/16 of an inch, it allowed it, you know, the hood from like kind of high rise to actually be more even with the fenders. Now, it's still not perfect, but I think it's good enough to where we can do our body work, get it painted, and then we'll do the fine-tuning when we're done. Just before we could do that, we actually had to get it kind of close, and then like I said, we had to cut out the notches for the headlights, and that's kind of what we'll be doing today. So since we've already done the driver's side, we're going to give you a few hints. Basically what we'll be doing, we're using a angle grinder with a cutoff disc. We're going to use that to kind of take a bigger chunk out, you know, basically get our basic outline in, put the headlight in, and then kind of close it, open, close it, and we'll fine tune it until we get it to where we're going to want our final line. Now, for the final line, I did not use the cutoff wheel, simply due to the fact it's not an accurate enough of a tool, and we kind of just been using flapping disc wheels and grinding wheels to fine tune it. And with the with the flap disc wheels, you know, you're really not going to take off a lot of metal at once, and that allows you to fine tune and get you a straight line. So let's go ahead, get the hood marked for cutting, and we'll show you how to take off the biggest chunk first. Alright guys, we're going to be using our Milwaukee angle grinder with a 40 grit cutoff wheel that's from China Freight. And yeah, so basically we're going to be cutting the bottom line. I think you guys can see that. Yeah, the top line is probably a little bit too aggressive. We'll use the bottom line and cut along there. Alright guys, there's our first piece fully removed, and obviously we're going to start test fitting, trimming where we need to, sand it, and get this all smoothed out. Alright, you saw us remove the first piece, that big chunk, that's gone. It's not really closed, you guys can see, but as much as it will close, I'm going to cut another, I believe that's about 1/4 inch off. I mean, it's between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. We're basically just going to keep doing this until the hood will close without it impacting the headlight. Alright guys, you should see another blue outline here. I'm actually not going to cut it anymore because, like I said, the cutting blade is simply not accurate enough. So what we're going to end up using is this 40 grit flap disc, and what we're going to do is basically fine tune this edge until we get it to this outline shape that we kind of have suggested on the top here. All right, so you can see the whole hood is flush. It's fully closed, you can't open it. Both headlights are in, so the driver's side and the passenger side over here are both in. And guys, I think we're good on the initial fitting, cutting, and smoothing out of the 2500 HD hood install. So I probably have 3 or 4 hours, more than that. I probably have roughly about 4 hours of mock-up cutting and fitting of the hood, as well as the trimming for the headlights, and then installing that back in. So the next step that I need to do on the truck is actually remove the hood, put the stock hood back on, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have to fill some of the holes on the bottom there. You need to weld that back shut, because basically the 2 pieces of sheet metal could flap around. So you're going to want to, tack that in every few inches and probably put some seam seal on it or something like that. And just that way that the hood is consistent, one piece of metal all the way through. So that'll be the next step, and then we're on to paint, but paint will be a different video. All right guys, so we're continuing the hood modification video. You guys have already seen us cut the hood, but what we're doing today is actually welding it. And if you guys can see, you can already see that I ground off all of the paint on this side, and I actually welded a seam all the way in the bottom here. There you go, you guys can see that we've already welded this seam shut. And how we closed that was basically spot welding or tack welding, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure what the proper term is, but literally just weld a spot, move on, weld a spot, move on, weld a spot. And literally just pressing the trigger for like a split second, it welds, move on, move on. And so basically what I did over here, like I was saying, was I moved around. I started at this end, went to the middle, went to this end, went back to this end. That way you're just not applying too much heat in one spot, and you're trying not to warp the panel, because that can happen when you're introducing a lot of heat by welding. So if you guys can see, I hope you can see that there should be an open gap here, from the edge of the hood to here. And we're basically going to close that in like we did over on the driver's side by spot welding that shut. And to be doing all our welding, we're using our Harbor Freight Vulcan 220 welder. And this thing should have all the settings on it still. Let's see what it comes up. Yep. That's correct. That's correct. Argon, that's correct. Alright, so our wire diameter is actually 30, and our thickness is going to be 18 gauge. I did measure the hood. It is between 18 and 19 gauge. It's kind of in between, and so that should be good. And if we want to, we could always turn the welder down, but like I said, I've already welded this whole side up. Didn't have an issue with blowing through the panel, and it got it all sealed up just fine. So we're pretty much ready to go with the welder. We got to turn the gas on. But before we start all that, I actually need to grind off all the paint. And that way you're not welding against a dirty surface, because when you've got dirty metal, the welds turn out like crap. So we'll buzz off all the paint, probably the same thing like we did here, probably like a 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. Get all that paint off, and we'll go ahead and start welding. Alright guys, I think we've welded up on this for the first round. I'm going to go ahead, use our angle grinder. We've got a 40 disc flap on here, 4.5 inch 40 grit disc on here. And we're just going to go, there are basically 3 ways to grind it. Top, back, and bottom. Those are your basic 3 ways to grind this down. And hopefully we will start to have some sheet metal being connected. I think we do. Well, actually we might. So we'll get all this ground down and we'll show you what we got. Alright guys, you just saw the time lapse of us welding this panel back together. And if you guys can hear it, it's all one solid piece. Now the driver's side actually looks a lot better, but I actually just ran out of gas on the passenger side and I attempted to finish welding the couple spots that I needed to finish. I ground that back down, and honestly, with it not having any shielding gas, the welds look like crap. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go refill the bottle, so that kind of sucks, but that's alright. And as I showed you guys earlier, I was using the angle grinder. I also busted out the Roll-Lock disc on the air tool, and the grinding, the flapper wheel does a lot better than that Roll-Lock disc. The Roll-Lock disc is more like almost a finishing sand, if that makes sense, because it makes it a lot smoother than what the angle grinder can do. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the welding portion of this hood modification to fit on the GMC. What we'll do next is the body work, and that is simply going to be a light coat of filler. We'll sand that off. We'll put on our glazing putty. We'll sand that off, and then we're ready to prime this in. All right, guys, you can see that we have the hood on the ground, and right now we're starting the body filler phase on the bottom. So we've got our filler on here, got a little bit of filler on top as well. This is pretty much probably like 99% that is all gonna be sanded off. But once we finish sanding this, we'll get to the glazing part. And over here, what this is actually a Duraglass, so it's basically a fiberglass reinforced filler. And the reason I put that on here, because this is basically where we kind of join those two panels together. I want to make sure that this thing's going to hold together, and having that fiberglass reinforced filler will help with that process. So then once we get the body filler done on both sides, we'll get started with the putty and then sand that. Alright, so you guys can see that we finished sanding this corner. We're completely done with that with the first layer of filler. So the next step for this corner will be that putty glaze. We'll put that on, and we'll sand that off. Over here you can kind of see we just applied the first layer of filler. We'll sand that off. You guys saw earlier we had the Duraglass on there, so that's all been sanded. We'll sand all this down, and kind of like I said, there really isn't going to be much left of filler, when we're sanding this stuff off. So we're going to sand off most of it. And mostly, I'm mostly concerned about the bottom for right now, because that's what we're going to end up painting first. The top, I kind of just put it on there because we were working on it. So once we get the bottom finished up, we'll be able to body work the whole top of the car. So, all right, guys. So we finished sanding the filler off, and what you guys are seeing now is the blue. That is the icing glazing putty, basically what that is, and it's on both sides. And we also did the bottom as well. The good thing is, this icing sands off pretty easily, and that should leave us with a really nice smooth surface, and we'll be able to put primer on it, and then we'll be able to start doing the rest of the top of the hood. So I'm gonna actually let this dry overnight, and we'll sand it in the morning. Alright guys, we've finished the body work for cutting this hood to fit the GMC. You guys will see that we've got the putty, you can see some of the filler underneath, and you see some bare metal. Same with the top, we sanded everything down. And after I finished basically sanding all of the putty down to where we could do our final sanding, I sanded it with 80 grit, 120, 220, 320, and then I stopped with 400 grit because that's what the primer calls for. So we did that on the top and bottom on the passenger, as well as over here on the driver. And you guys will see there's not much body filler at all, or the putty. And the only kind of mistake I made was when I was sanding off the putty on this side, I went too deep, so I had to go back, make some more, and just put 2 small batches on. I finished sanding that down. And now we're ready for our self-etching primer. And like our previous video, we're basically just gonna be spraying over our bodywork and sealing all this stuff in. All right guys, so I actually just cleaned off the driver's side corner with some wax and grease remover, and we have let that dry. So now we're basically just gonna go ahead and start spraying our self-etching primer. Alright guys, so that's pretty much going to be it for fitting the Chevy hood on the GMC. You know, we kind of went through cutting it, welding it, doing the body work, and finally putting it in primer. Obviously this isn't going to be the final paint video. We got to do the top, we got to do the body work on the top. And the bottom, I think I'm simply just going to scuff it and paint it body color and then call it done, because that's pretty much what the factory does. I don't think there's a clear. So we're just going to do, like I said, scuff it, base coat, and that's it. You know, a base coat of color, and pretty much gonna be it. And I may or may not actually paint the center of the hood. I'm thinking I'm obviously gonna do the outline, but this whole center section is covered up with that you know, that hood blanket. So does it make sense to waste all that paint on underneath the hood, which you're literally never gonna see, or do the whole hood? I don't know yet. I do have 4 cans of paint. I think we should be fine with coverage and not running out of paint, but like I said, that's just, it's almost like an entire another coat that we almost don't have to do. But anyway, this primer I'm going to let dry for a couple of days before we start doing any body work. Like I said, underneath we're simply going to scuff it, paint it, call it good. The top, man, I don't know. I'm not going to strip it, but I'm obviously going to go through the steps of getting it probably like 120, 220, 320, and we're probably going to stop at 400. Then we're going to do a coat or two of high build primer, and then, you know, continue with our epoxy, our base coat, our clear coat. So if you guys want to keep up with the hood progress, you know, hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications. That way you guys will know when I upload new content. And we'll try to have links down below with all the products that we used today. We've used a lot. And make sure you check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.